welcome back to this space. And if you're visiting my channel for the first time, you're also highly welcome. In this lecture, I'll be looking at the connective tissue. If we go back to the general orientation of tissue, we know that tissues are a collection of cells that are packed together. And we have different types of tissue. We have the epithelial tissue. The epithelial tissue basically is a collection of cells that are suspended on a basement membrane. If you look at this image here, this is the configuration of what an epithelial tissue looks like. You see a number of cells, of course, arranged on a basement membrane. Then the second type of tissue that we have is the muscle tissue. And this is what is presented here in this image, where you have a number of muscle cells also packed together. And the third type is the nerve tissue. This is what is also seen to be presented here in this image, where you have specialized cells that are referred to as neurons packed with its surrounding neuroglia, which are the supporting cells. And this is what is seen in the central nervous system. Then the last type of tissue that we have is the connective tissue. And this is the configuration of the connective tissue here. The connective tissue is seen to have a number of cells, of course, suspended in the extracellular matrix. So this is what this lecture will be focusing on, the connective tissue. And in this lecture, we'll be unfolding the general configuration of the connective tissue and also dwelling more on its structural components. The connective tissue, out of all the tissues that we have listed in our previous slide, is the most abundant. This is widely spread around the body. We have it in form of ligaments. We have connective tissues in form of tendon. We have it in form of the lamina propria. We also have the specialized type of connective tissue, and this includes blood, bone, and also cartilages. BBC can be used to represent this set of connective tissue. These are specialized connective tissue. So we have a number of tissue in form of these structures that we have listed around the different regions of the body. So they are widespread around the body. And what they do basically is to provide structural organization of the body that is seen to support the general framework of the body. They are also seen to connect the different tissue types that we have in the body. And this is where the target of the name connective tissue is. And this is why we should dwell more on this. We say that the connective tissue are seen to connect the different tissues that we have in the body. If we try to use this image down here for illustration, by this side here is where we have the nail joint. In the nail joint, we have the cruciate ligament here that is arrowed in red. This cruciate ligament is seen to connect the bones around the nail joint. So you see the cruciate ligament embedded within this joint space. So this is where it is helping to connect a type of specialized connective tissue with the other. And if you also try to look at this image here, we have the tendon. We say that the connective tissue are also seen in form of tendon. And in this specific region, you see that the tendon is seen to connect the muscle to the bone around this region. We know that the muscle is a form of tissue, as we have highlighted in our previous slide, while the bone is a specialized type of connective tissue. So you see the tendon connecting one tissue type to the other. Also in this image by the side here, you have the lamina propria. This lamina propria is a submucosal tissue that is located below the mucosal lining. We know that the mucosal lining are epithelium lining, and this is what is seen to be arrowed here above, while below here we have the muscularis layer. So in between the mucosal layer and the muscularis layer is where we have the lamina propria. So you see this lamina propria trying to create like a connection between the mucosal lining at the internal part and also the muscularis layer at the more superficial part. So you see it also creating a form of connection between these two subregions. And we know that the muscularis layer is a muscle tissue, while the mucosal lining is an epithelial tissue. So you see that at this point, the lamina propria is seen to connect the muscle tissue with the epithelial tissue. If you also go back to this first image, you have the cartilage. The cartilage is a specialized type of connective tissue. And at this point, you see it lining the articular surfaces. And at this point, it's also trying to help create a connection between the bones that are seen at the joints. So you see that generally, connective tissue, apart from providing structural organization and also support, they are also seen to help connect different types of tissues together. And we've tried to illustrate it using these diagrams here. And also to add that we have different types of connective tissue, and these different types are seen to present different functions. So we go through with this lecture, we would be highlighting the different types that we have, and also their specific functions that they also exhibit. And this will take us to this slide where we'll be highlighting the different functions of the connective tissue. Remember, we highlighted that we have different types in our previous slide. So if you look at the function, the first one is connecting and also binding. So they are able to provide the function of connecting different tissues together and also helping to bind them together. So if you look at the specific type of connective tissue responsible for this function, we say that it is the tendons, ligaments, and also the lamina propria. We've tried to highlight this in our previous slide and also indicate the site where they are seen to provide this binding or connecting function. Then the second function is structural framework of the body. Remember, we highlighted that bone is a specialized type of connective tissue. It is a connective tissue that forms the structural component of the skeletal system, and this is known to give the structural framework of the body. It is onto this framework that muscles and ligaments are attached upon. So this is a function that is also attributed to connective tissue. Then the next function is protection of delicate organ. This is also attributed to a specialized connective tissue that is referred to as bone. The bone is seen to protect delicate organs in the body, which includes the brain and also the sense organs. So they help to create an accommodation site for this delicate organ. And this is also one of the functions of the connective tissue as it relates to bone. Then the next one is to support hand movement. This can also be related to bone. They also help to support the body because bone are seen to connect at joints, and it is at the point where these connections are created that allows for movement. Then the next function is transport of nutrients and also metabolites. And this is directed to blood tissue. We say that blood is also a specialized type of connective tissue, and we know that blood is in liquid form, and because of this is able to allow the movement or the transportation of fluid and also metabolites from one region of the body to the other. The next function of connective tissue is immunological defense, and this is also attributed to blood tissue. In the blood tissue, we have a number of white blood cells that are responsible for immunological surveillance and also defense. The next function is energy storage, and this is attributed to the adipose tissue. The adipose tissue is also a form of connective tissue, and this tissue is seen to store energy in form of fat or lipids, so that when the need arises, this will be converted back into the energy that the body can utilize. Then the next function is cushioning effect and also insulating effect. This is also attributed to adipose tissue. They are seen to help guide or surround soft tissue organs, thereby helping to pad them and also keep them in place. They are also responsible for insulating the body. During the cold, the adipose tissue is seen to conserve body heat so that it can be retained within the body and help warm up the body even when the weather is cold. So this is how the adipose tissue is seen to help support the process of insulating the body against temperature. So these are the functions that the connective tissues exhibit. And of course, we've tried to tag each function to the specific type of connective tissue that exhibits these specific functions. So let's drive further to the micro component of the connective tissue. We've tried to describe the connective tissue when we started this lecture, that it is basically cells that are embedded in extracellular matrix. We tried to check the configuration of other tissues that we highlighted, which include the epithelial tissue, the muscle tissue, and also the nerve tissue. You see that the configuration is different from the connective tissue. The connective tissue is basically seen to contain cells that are embedded in extracellular matrix. Extracellular component of the connective tissue. Extracellular means outside the cell. So any structure that you see or substance that is located outside the cell are taken as the extracellular matrix, while the cell itself is taken as part of the cellular component, just as the name implies. So you have a number of cells here highlighted in red, and these cells are embedded in the extracellular matrix. And we've tried to illustrate what extracellular means, which is the matrix that is located outside the cellular environment. So this is the cellular environment here, highlighted in red, and outside it we have the extracellular matrix. So this is what basically the connective tissue is made up of. But driving further, the extracellular matrix is not just seen to be empty, it is seen to be embedded with fibers and ground substance. So this is where we have the fibers here highlighted in yellow, and these fibers are embedded within the ground substance that is highlighted here in blue. The ground substance is like the background of the connective tissue. This is what gives the framework of the connective tissue. Onto the background is where we have other substance then embedded within. So with the ground substance is basically made up of chemical substances and also fluid. And this is what is highlighted here in blue. So when we have the ground substance, we then have the fibers that is highlighted here in yellow, also embedded within the ground substance. And these two structures are taken as the extracellular matrix, which means the matrix that is located outside the cellular compartment, just as we've illustrated. So if we try to divide the component of the connective tissue into two, we say we have the cellular component and also the extracellular matrix. While the extracellular matrix is made up of the fibers and also the ground substance. We will be driving into each of these components to establish the different configuration that they present within the connective tissue. First, let's drive in through the cells of the connective tissue. The cells of the connective tissue is good for us to have that they account for a small fraction of the connective tissue when you try to compare them with other types of tissue. For the other tissues, such as the epithelium, the nerve tissue, and also the muscle tissue, the cells are seen to form the bulk of this tissue. While in connective tissue, the cells contribute to a small fraction of the connective tissue, while we also have other structures embedded within this space. And this we try to highlight during the course of this lecture, that within the connective tissue, we have the cellular component and also the extracellular matrix. The extracellular matrix is made up of the fibers and also the ground substance. You can see that we have a number of structures coming together to form the connective tissue. Generally, the cells of the connective tissue are classified as fixed cells. We have fixed or resident cells. These cells are immobile cells. They are seen to be permanently located within the connective tissue. They do not have the grace to move out of space. And these cells include the fibroblasts and also the adipocytes. These two cells are permanently located within the connective tissue. And the other class of cells that we have in the connective tissue are wandering cells. These are transient cells. They are mobile. They have the capacity to move from one region to the other. And this includes the immune cells. We have the macrophages. These macrophages are generally fixed, but we have some seen to be wandering, and this is why we try to list them under the wandering cell. Then we have the mast cell and we have the white blood cells. These cells are seen to be mobile, hence they have the capacity to move from one region to the other. And going further, we'll be looking at each of these cells to see their features and the functions that they exhibit within the connective tissue. So first, the fixed cells, we say that we have the fibroblast. The fibroblast is the most common type of cell that is seen in the connective tissue. What they do basically is to synthesize the extracellular matrix. So you see them producing the fibers that is embedded within the extracellular matrix and also the extracellular chemicals. These fibroblasts are also responsible for healing process. So when a site is damaged, you see the fibroblasts around this region trying to produce more of the extracellular fibers and also the extracellular chemicals, thereby creating more structure around that region. So they are also seen to contribute to healing process. If you look at this image up here, this is where we have the fibroblasts here, arrowed in white. You see the fibroblasts are seen to present a number of processes. And within this connective tissue here, you also see that they are responsible for producing extracellular fibers. And this is what is seen to be arrowed here in red. They are also involved in the production of extracellular chemicals. Then if you look at this image down here, this is what the configuration of the fibroblast looks like. They are active cells. And that is why you see that the cytoplasm is very busy. You see a number of organelles within the fibroblast. You have the rough endoplasmic reticulum highlighted in blue. You have the Golgi apparatus here that is highlighted in green. You also have vesicles here that is highlighted in yellow. So you have a number of structures that are responsible for the production of substances and also the packaging of those substances. So you see that the cytoplasm is very active because they are continuously producing substances for the extracellular matrix. And this is what the configuration here presents. Then another type of cell that we have in the connective tissue that are seen to also be fixed are the adipocytes. The adipocytes are known to store fats or lipids. If you look at this image down here, this is what the general configuration of an adipocyte looks like. You see the large vacuole or reservoir for fat that is arrowed here in red. So this is the point where fat or lipids is stored. And you see the cellular organelles are pushed to one side so as to create space for the large vacuole for fats and lipid storage. So this is the configuration of the adipocyte. These two cells are seen to be fixed within the connective tissue. So let's try and drive further to the macrophages. The macrophages are known to ingest foreign matters or unwanted substances. If you look at this image by the side, this is what the configuration of the macrophage looks like. And you see at this point, this macrophage is trying to engulf or ingest foreign matter. And this is what is seen to be highlighted here in red. So they tend to change their shape to accommodate the structure or substances that they are going to attack. So you see them constantly changing their appearances to suit the situation at hand. Also, the macrophages in different regions of the body attack specific names. In the liver, they are referred to as the Kupffer cells. In the central nervous system, they are referred to as the microglia. In the skin, they are referred to as the Langerhans cells, while in the wall of the alveoli, they are referred to as the dust cells. So you see that at specific regions of the body, they are seen to be given specific names. Also to add that the macrophages at this specific region are fixed. So some macrophages are seen to be fixed, which means that they are immobile. They are seen to be contained and located permanently within these tissues. While you have other forms of macrophages that have the capacity to move around, and these are so classified as the wandering cell. So you have macrophages, you have some are fixed, while some are wandering. So it's good for us to highlight this. Then going to the cells within the connective tissue that are seen as wandering cell, we have the mast cell. This mast cell are alarm cell. They tend to create inflammatory responses. So they release chemicals to activate other cells around for defense. So this is the configuration of the mast cell highlighted here in red, and you see them releasing a number of chemical substances out of them to desensitize the surrounding cell of defense. Then the other types of wandering cells that we have are the white blood cells, and we have a number of white blood cells types that are seen to be wandering around, and they create weapon against microorganisms or wanted substances. And among these, we have the lymphocytes. We also have the plasma cells, which are subset or subgrade of the lymphocytes. We have the eosinophil, we have the basophil, and we have the neutrophils. These cells are seen to leave the blood and finding their way into the submucosal tissue, specifically the lamina propria. And we know that the lamina propria is a form of connective tissue, as we've tried to highlight in our previous slide. So you see these cells leaving the blood and entering into the lamina propria, where they are seen to exhibit immune function. So these cells are also wandering cells. So now, having described the cellular component of the connective tissue, we said that the component of the connective tissue can broadly be divided into the cellular component and the extracellular component. We've tried to highlight the different cells that can be found or seen within the connective tissue. And we also try to reclassify them into the fixed and also the wandering cells. So for the extracellular matrix, we say that the extracellular matrix is not plain. It is seen to be embedded also with substructures. The extracellular matrix is seen to contain fibers and also the ground substance. The ground substance is like the background of the connective tissue onto which fibers and also the cells are embedded within. So we have the extracellular matrix containing the fibers and also the ground substance. So let's try and use this image by the side to represent the ground substance. The ground substance, we say it's like the background of the connective tissue. And it is within this ground substance that we have fibers that are highlighted here in yellow. So we have fibers embedded within the ground substance, and these two structural components are seen to make up the extracellular matrix, which of course we say is a matrix that is located outside the cellular environment. So removing the cell from the connective tissue, this is what we'll be left with, which will be the extracellular matrix, and this will include the fibers and also the ground substance. So let's dive deep into the fibers. The fibers are produced by the fibroblasts. Remember when we try to highlight the fixed cells of the connective tissue, we say the fibroblast is one of the fixed cells that are located within the connective tissue. And what they are responsible for is the secretion of fibers and also the ground substance. So basically, they are seen to provide the extracellular matrix of the connective tissue. So the fibers can be in form of collagen fibers, which of course is the most common. It can be in form of reticular fiber, and finally we can have the elastic type of fibers. So these are the three types of fibers that we have in the connective tissue. So let me drive and see the structural configuration of features of each of the fibers. For the collagen fibers, this fiber is the most abundant, as we've said, and what it does is to add tensile strength to connective tissue. They are also seen at areas where repairs are needed to occur. So when we have injury sites, you see these collagen fibers within that region trying to rescue the situation by repairing the damaged site. They are mostly seen in regions where strength and support are needed to be created. So you see them within the bones, the cartilage, and also the tendon. So within this type of connective tissue, you see high deposits of collagen fibers. But this type of connective tissue are designed for support. And this is where they will also be needing strength to exert these functions. The collagen fibers are basically made up of fibrins that are made up of tropocollagen subunits. So you have tropocollagen subunits here highlighted in red. You have a number of these tropocollagen subunits coming together to form a single collagen fiber. So going to the second type of fiber, which is the reticular fiber, this reticular fiber also gives structural support to connective tissue, but it is not as thick as what the collagen fibers present. So you see them as short, thin, branching meshwork of fibers. If you try to use this image by the side, this is the kind of configuration that they present. And if you try to compare this with the collagen fibers, you see that the collagen fibers appears to be thicker in terms of size. And this is what is presented here in this image. The reticular fibers are subversion of the collagen fibers, but they are not seen to provide as much strength as the collagen fiber will present, considering their size. If you drive deep into the size of reticular fibers, you see that they are not as thick as what the collagen fibers present. And you should expect that the kind of strength that they will provide will not also be as much as what the collagen fibers will present. So they also help to support, but the support is not as strong as what is delivered or presented by the collagen fibers. The last type of fiber that we have is the elastic fiber. This elastic fiber, just from the name, you see that they are made up of bundles of elastin fibrins, and this basically helps to restore the normal shape or size of the connective tissue when they are being distorted. So when there is an expansion or an enlargement, they have the capacity to return back to their original size because of the elastin fibrins, and they are usually thinner than the collagen fibrins. So if you look at this image here, this is the kind of configuration that elastic fibers present. And in connective tissue, where you see high deposit of elastic fibers is in the dermis of the skin, where they are able to stretch and also regain back their shape after distortion. So let's drive further to the ground substance. We say that the general configuration of the connective tissue is the cellular component and also the extracellular component. The extracellular component is seen to contain the fibers and also the ground substance. We've tried to describe the fibers in our previous slide, also highlighting the different types of fibers that we have in the connective tissue. So for the ground substance, if you try to use this image here by the side, this is what the ground substance looks like. It is like the background of the connective tissue. It is onto this background that the fibers and also the cells are embedded within. So we can say that it is the space that is located between the cells and also the fibers. So if you look at this image down here, this is why we have the cells here highlighted in red. And of course, we also have the fibers here embedded within the extracellular matrix. So the space that is created between the cells and also the fibers are referred to as the ground substance because it is the background onto which the structures are embedded within. And this is to say that the ground substance together with the fibers form the extracellular matrix because they are structures that are located outside the cellular environment. We tried to illustrate this when we started this lecture. So basically, the ground substance is seen to contain chemicals, and these chemicals are in form of glycosaminoglycans, which can also be tagged as GAG, glycoproteins, and also the protoglycans. So these are the chemicals that are seen to be embedded in a fluid, and these two structures will come together to form the ground substance. This ground substance is a gel-like substance, and this substance is seen to help hold the structures that are embedded within the extracellular matrix together. If you look at this image down here, you see that the region that is highlighted in blue is the ground substance, and embedded within the ground substance, we have the fibers, and we also have the cells. These structures are needed to be held together, and it is the ground substance that helps to provide this structural support or the holding force that helps to connect these structures together. It appears to be gel-like, which helps to hold these structures together. So apart from this fact, because the ground substance is embedded in fluid, it creates a form of liquefied environment that tends to allow for diffusion. So we have nutrients and metabolites running from different regions of the connective tissue to the other. And this is because the ground substance has created the avenue for this movement to occur. So apart from creating a gel-like configuration by helping to hold the structures in place, it is also helping to create an atmosphere through which nutrients and also metabolites can also move across the connective tissue. And this is to add that the ground substance, remember in our previous slide, we established that it is gel-like, which means that it is basically chemicals embedded in fluid. And if you look at this configuration here, this is what is presented in this image here, highlighted in blue. We say that it is onto this ground substance that we have fibers and also cells embedded within. We also say that the ground substance is also a subcomponent of the extracellular matrix because it is a region of the connective tissue that is located outside the cellular environment, and these with the fibers are taken as the extracellular matrix. It is important for us to add that the ground substance can occur in different versions, especially in a specialized connective tissue. And this is why they are so named specialized connective tissue, because they present distinct property of the ground substance. So the ground substance can be highly modified in the specialized connective tissue, which means that the configuration that is seen in the general connective tissue is not what is presented within them. So you can have in blood where the ground substance is seen to be in liquid form. The ground substance of blood is plasma, and plasma is in liquid form, and this is why blood also takes this kind of configuration. We also have it in bone, where the ground substance will be mineralized due to deposit of calcium salt. And you see that the ground substance in this type of connective tissue will be solid. So they present a form of solidified ground substance, and this is why this structure appears to be hard. The ground substance of bone is in solid form, and it is specifically referred to as the osteoid. Then we also have in cartilage. In cartilage, we have the ground substance in semi-solid form, and this is why you see that the cartilage also presents some level of hardness. So you can say that the ground substance, even though in the general connective tissue, they have a general orientation and also the pattern by which they are formed. But we have specialized connective tissue, and this is why they are so referred to as specialized, because they have distinct features that they present. And this is what we've tried to highlight in this slide. So let's drive further to see what is distinct about the connective tissue. You try to compare the connective tissue with the other tissue. You see that the connective tissue is derived from the embryonic mesenchyme. The embryonic mesenchyme is an undifferentiated structure that originates from the embryonic mesoderm. We know that in the embryo, we have three germ layers. We have the ectoderm that is highlighted in red. We have the mesoderm, which is the middle layer, which is highlighted in black. Then we have the endoderm, which is highlighted here in blue, which is the innermost layer. So you see these three layers will finally be transformed or develop into different structures in the body. It is the mesodermal layer, and this is the region where we have the embryonic mesenchyme, which are undifferentiated structure around this region. So it is the specific region around the mesoderm, which is the embryonic mesenchyme, that is responsible for the different connective tissues that we have in the body, which include bone, the lamina propria, the cartilages, and also the other types of connective tissue that we have in the body. So it's good for us to know the specific regions of the derm layers where these tissues are derived from. Then secondly, what distincts the connective tissue from other tissue is that the general configuration of the connective tissue basically entails cells embedded in extracellular matrix. This we have adequately illustrated during the course of this lecture. If you look at other type of tissues like the epithelial tissue, it is basically collection of cells that are lined on top of a basement membrane. Then if you look at the nerve tissue, it's a collection of specialized cells which are referred to as neurons that are collected together with its surrounding neuroglia. Then also the muscle tissue basically are a collection of muscle cells that are collected together. But what is distinct about connective tissue is that you have a number of cells embedded in the extracellular matrix. And this extracellular matrix include fibers and also ground substance. So this is the general orientation of connective tissue. And this is distinct from the other types of tissues that we have. Then the other thing that distincts it, of course, is to state that the functions of these connective tissues are based on the characteristics of their content. So it depends on if this connective tissue is going to be providing structural support. It means it is going to have more of collagen fibers, because we know that collagen fibers give strength to structures. Then when we have connective tissue that are responsible for storing fat or lipids, we should expect that this type of connective tissue will have a high number of adipocytes. And you try to build a particular connective tissue to suit a particular function. Its functions will be based on the characteristics of what they contain. And this is what the connective tissue represents. And they are also widely distributed around the body. The connective tissue are the most abundant and they are widely distributed around the body. So thanks for watching this video. Let's continue to stay glued to this channel.